Good morning. I see that we have quorum, and so I call this meeting of the Standing Senate Committee on Agriculture and Forestry to order. Hello, good morning, everyone. Good to see everyone here. Thanks for joining us. I'd like to begin by welcoming members, my colleagues, members of the committee, and witnesses. We have no witnesses, as well as those watching on the World Wide Web. My name is Rob Black, Senator from Ontario, and I chair this committee. I'd like to start by asking my colleagues to introduce themselves around the table, starting with our Deputy Chair.
I'm Paula Simons from the province of Alberta, Treaty 6 territory.
Brent Cotter, Senator from Saskatchewan.
Good morning. I see that we have quorum, and so I call this meeting of the Standing Senate Committee on Agriculture and Forestry.
Bonjour, Raymond Saint-Germain, Québec.
Sharon Bury, Senator for Ontario.
Julie Méville de Chêne, Québec.
Andrew Cardozo, Ontario.
Michael McDonald, gentleman farmer from Nova Scotia.
Don Plett, Manitoba.
Victor O, Ontario.
Thank you. Welcome, colleagues. Today, the committee is meeting to begin clause-by-clause consideration on Bill C-234, an act to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. Before we begin, I would like to remind senators of a number of points. If at any point a senator is not clear where we are in the process, please ask for clarification. I do want to ensure that at all times we have all the same understanding of where we're at in the process. In terms of the mechanics of the process, when more than one amendment is proposed to be moved in a clause, amendments should be proposed in the order of the lines of the clause. If a senator is opposed to an entire clause, the proper process is not to move a motion to delete the entire clause, but rather to vote against the clause as standing as part of the bill. Some amendments that are moved may have consequential effects on other parts of the bill. It is therefore useful in this process if a senator moving an amendment identified to the committee other clauses in this bill where the amendment could have an effect. Otherwise, it could be very difficult for members of the committee to remain consistent in their decision-making. Number 5. Because no notice is required to move amendments, there can, of course, have been no preliminary analysis of the amendments to establish which ones may be of consequence to others and which may be of contradictory. If committee members ever have any questions about the process or any propriety of anything occurring, they can certainly raise a point of order. As chair, I will listen to the argument, decide whether when there has been sufficient discussion on the matter or order, and make a ruling. Number 7, the committee is the ultimate master of business within the bounds established by the Senate, and a ruling of the chair can be appealed to the full committee by asking whether the ruling shall be sustained. Number 8, I wish to remind honourable senators that if there is ever any uncertainty as to the results of a voice vote or a show of hands, the most effective route is to request a roll call vote, which obviously provides unambiguous results. Number 9, finally, senators are aware that any tied vote negates the motion in question. And finally, are there any questions on any of the above before we proceed? Okay, we can proceed. Colleagues, is it agreed that the committee proceed to clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-234, an act to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act?
Agreed.
Shall the title stand postponed?
Agreed.
Shall Clause 1 carry? Pardon? Shall Clause 1 carry? No. Thank you. Amendment now. Please, Senator Delphine, if you'd prepare or present your amendment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm proposing an amendment to on page 1, section 1. I read the amendment. À la page 1, par substitution.
At page 1, by replacing lines 4 to 15 with the following: 1, bracket 1, paragraph C of the definition, eligible farming machinery, in section 3 of the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, is replaced by the end of quote. And on page 2, by deleting lines 1 to 10.
This amendment means that The bill will be limited to grain drying equipment and will exclude heating of barns and barns, essentially. I've made this amendment because the amendment will limit, of course, the exemptions targeted by this bill to grain drying and will exclude barn heating and cooling. The committee clearly heard that alternatives and efficiencies are really achievable in barn heating. This is the case more so than grain drying, although significant efficiencies are also possible. MP Lobb, the sponsor of the bill, said in the House of Commons, yes, there are more efficient grain dryers, end of quote. Professor Singh from the Lethbridge College spoke about a reduction of about 30% being achievable in grain drying with more efficient equipment. But let's move to heating. Heating is even clearer. Alternatives or efficiencies in barn heating or cooling include better insulation, in-floor heating, geothermal heat pumps, air source heat pumps, energy-efficient ventilation fans, biomass heating, LED lighting, more natural lighting, and light-colored, heat-reflective paints, etc. We are familiar with some of these options from home and other buildings located in Canada. Many Canadians and businesses are investing in such ways to reduce emissions, as incentivized by the carbon pricing policy. The sponsor of the bill, MP Lobb, said, and I quote, "If you look at the heating of barns, it is moving lockstep with the innovations that are heating a home, a commercial building, or an industrial building, because it only makes financial sense," end of quote. This amendment will maintain the financial incentive to reduce emissions from raising livestock in barns by investing in alternative or efficient barn heating or cooling, an option available right now. We have been told by some supporters of this bill that it responds to a lack of viable alternatives, or perhaps it is implied efficiencies. With barn heating, this is a false premise. Parliament should not legislate on a false premise. Finally, in the bigger picture, this amendment will discourage other sectors from seeking to exempt their economic activities that involve heating buildings, such as retail stores, supply chains infrastructure, and other businesses, perhaps through other private members' bill. We must guard against poking holes in Canada's coherent climate plan, as occurred in Scandinavia, according to Professor Catherine Harrison, one of the witnesses. Emissions impose an environment cost with pollution that should have a price to encourage reduction, and at this time of a climate crisis. With this amendment, we can at least draw a line. We can say if you can readily invest to reduce emissions in barn heating or cooling, which is the case, our law should incentivize that while providing relief through the 2022 tax rebate via Bill C-8. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Because Senator Delphond started with his debate, I just want to move, it is moved by the Honourable Senator Delphond that Bill C-234 be amended in Clause 1A on page 1 by replacing lines 4 to 15 with the following: 1, bracket 1, paragraph C of the definition eligible farm machinery in section 3 of the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act is replaced by the, and B on page 2 by deleting lines 1 to 10. So now I'll call for debate, or Senator Beery.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being on this committee, Senator Delphond. I really respect your comments and I'm a junior senator, so I'm learning. And of course, the first thing they give to you is that book on the Senate procedures and practice, which I've been studiously reading. And so I want to kind of raise a point of order just to find out if this is allowable. So regarding the admissibility of my esteemed colleague's amendment on whether or not this amendment is admissible. So here are my arguments. So I've been reading that procedure and practice book and say on page 114, an amendment must respect the principle and scope of the bill, and it must be relevant to it. It is a fundamental principle that a committee is bound by the decision of the House, given on second reading in favor of the principle of the bill, and should not therefore amend the bill in a manner that's destructive to it. And so it further says that it should not be destructive in its goals. So I'm going to focus my arguments on one, the scope of the bill, the decision at second reading, and whether this amendment is destructive to its original goals. So I quoted the summary for the bill, which was the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, and says that this act amends the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act to expand the definition of eligible farming machinery and to extend the exemption for qualifying farm fuel to marketable natural gas. That means eligible farm machinery, grain drying, and heating and cooling for livestock, and qualifying farm fuels now included marketable natural gas and propane. No. So at second reading, the objective was laid out by the sponsor to create additional exemptions for critical farming practices, such as grain drying, heating and cooling barns, and greenhouses. That was also intended by the sponsor in the other place. So that answers the question of the scope and what was decided at second reading. Now, the third point of amending a bill in a manner destructive to its original principles and goals, removing property used for the purpose of providing heating or cooling to a building or similar structure used for raising or housing livestock or growing crops, which is really the effect of Senator Dalfon's amendment, in my opinion, would be destructive to the bill's original purpose. So, Chair and my colleagues, I'd like your ruling and debate on whether this amendment is admissible.
Thank you. So on debate on this point of order. Senator Wu.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Bury, for raising that question and for your diligence in studying the rules of the Senate. I don't agree that this amendment is destructive of the purpose of the bill. The very idea of exemptions raises the question of which sectors should have exemptions. And it's reasonable for a Senate committee to think about whether the sectors described, the processes described, should be included or excluded. It's conceivable that this committee could have considered sectors to be included for further exemptions. We have not done that. Certainly I have not heard any suggestion to that effect. And so to do the reverse, which is to take out one of the sectors deemed to be inappropriate in the view of Senator Dalfon, I think is entirely in keeping with the general thrust of the bill. I would go further to say that this amendment, as explained by Senator Dalfon, has a logic to it. It's not done capriciously. It's not done in a way that is malicious in intent to damage the bill for the sake of damaging the bill. If you listen carefully to Senator Dalfon's explanation, we will all have heard that there are, in the case of barn heating, alternatives to natural gas and propane because of the parallels to heating of buildings in general. We know very well from our experience living and working in buildings and managing homes, that the technology to improve heating efficiency has improved dramatically, and that many of us, myself included, respond to incentives to install the sorts of changes that are needed to improve efficiency. The same, in many respects, applies to barns. The logic is defensible. I don't know if you will support it, but the logic is defensible, and therefore, Chair, I respectfully suggest that this point of order be declined.
Thank you, Senator Wu. Further debate on the point of order? Senator Plett?
Well, thank you, Chair. Senator Bury suggested she was somewhat of a new committee member. I'm probably a little newer yet than she is for this particular committee, but of course I spent the first probably 9 years, maybe 10 years of my Senate life serving on Ag, and definitely enjoyed that, and I'm happy to be here today. The sponsor of the bill in the Senate is away on some other Senate business that he couldn't attend this particular meeting, and so as an ex officio member, I'm here. Chair, if I could, I'd like to make some opening remarks because they are really relevant both to this amendment as well as others, and then I would like to make some comments specifically on this amendment in support of Senator Bury's point of order.
So you're speaking to, you will get to Senator
I will be
Bury's.
speaking to her point of order, but this encompasses this and all amendments, whether or not you at the end rule in favor of Senator Bury's point of order or not. But amending this bill, colleagues, will hurt farmers because it will delay the legislation which the agricultural community has told us is critically needed. I have spoken with multiple farm organizations about these amendments, and they are very upset that possibly a handful of senators are, as they say, playing games with their livelihood. This is what the grain farmers of Ontario told me. The biggest reason for us to not support these or any amendments is that the amendments further delay relief from the carbon tax for our farmers because the bill will be forced to go back to the House of Commons. We have been working on this for years. Relief is needed now for farmers who are right now taking their crop off, drying it. If the Senate would pass this bill this fall, farmers could have their relief this year on their harvest, and that would be the best outcome for the farmers. Now, I would understand these amendments if there were substantive reasons for them, but there are not. Anyone who has been paying attention to the testimony of committee and the other evidence presented knows this is not the case. These amendments are, in fact, frivolous and vexatious. This bill was studied extensively at the House of Commons Agriculture Committee. The proposed amendments provided no added value, and we should respect the work and the decision of the House. This bill received unanimous support from the Green Party, the Bloc Party, the NDP Party, and the Conservative Party, and a number of Liberal members voted in favor of this, including the chair of the Agriculture Committee.
Excuse me, Senator Plett.
I want to come in after this.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Senator
All
Plett.
parties that support the pollution price, but decided that this bill was the right course of action for farmers, for food security, and for the environment. Now, specifically to this amendment, I would like to just simply second what Senator Bury has already said, that as she proposes this amendment is out of order because it changes the spirit of the bill and should be ruled out of order. I will read some excerpts from the House of Commons Procedure and Practice, which states the following. To be admissible, amendments should conform to the rules and practices of the House in order to preserve the integrity of the bill. The committee chair rules on the admissibility of amendments and is advised by the legislative clerk. The following are the most common rules of admissibility. The principle of the bill. The principle of the bill is the object or purpose which the bill seeks to achieve. The principle of the bill is fixed when the bill is adopted at second reading. Any amendment contrary to the principle of the bill is inadmissible. The scope of the bill. The scope of the bill means the schemes or ways by which the principle of the bill are achieved. The scope of the bill is fixed when the bill is adopted at second reading. Any amendment that goes beyond the scope of the bill is inadmissible. When a bill is referred to a committee before second reading, amendments may alter the principle and scope of the bill. So, Mr. Chairman, this amendment both undermines the principle of the bill and is clearly outside the scope of this bill, and I would like to read into the record a letter from the Chair of the Commons Ag Committee and the Vice Chair, if I could, please, Chair, in relation to this. And this is, of course, addressed to you, Senator Black, but copied to I'm sure, all senators. We are writing today in relation to your committee study on Bill C-234, an act to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. This bill is an extremely important one for Canadian farmers across the country and was supported by members representing all parties in the House of Commons. The Commons Agricultural Committee took careful consideration of the proposed legislation and made amendments to the Sunset Clause, with a proposed exemption at 8 years, while also ensuring buildings supporting crop production were included in the spirit of the bill. While we both appreciate the Senate has a role in scrutinizing legislation coming from the House, there should be some restraint from members in completely changing the spirit and intention of the democratically elected House. The proposed amendment tabled by Senator Delphon to delete provisions related to the heating of buildings, housing livestock, or to grow crops would completely undermine the intention of the bill and the expression of the vast majority of the House of Commons. We are of the view this initiative is intended to remedy an oversight in the original price on pollution legislation, which did not include propane and natural gas in the list of exemptions. Again, time is of the essence. This bill matters to farmers, and as winter approaches, the proposed legislation will impact farm affordability and cash flow. Any amendments to the bill would further delay its implementation, and while we appreciate the role of the Senate, we ask your committee members to weigh their proposed amendments versus the merits of advancing this meaningful initiative. Your work matters, and farmers are counting on you. As your parliamentary colleagues, we ask that you advance Bill C-234 as quickly as possible, and that is signed by Cody Bloy, of the Chair of the Ag Committee, and John Barlow, the Vice Chair. So, respectfully, Chair, I would like to second or support Senator Bury's motion that this is out of scope and out of order.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Platt. Senator Wu.
Thank you, Chair. It is extraordinary to hear Senator Platt make an argument that we should essentially roll over to what the House of Commons has sent us and to read into the record a letter from two co-chairs, the chair and deputy chair of a committee in the House, essentially browbeating us, browbeating senators into following what they want us to do. The only part of that letter that we should pay attention to is the request that we take the amendments on their merits and to see if they conform to our judgment, using our sober second thought on whether this is good for the country. We should not be cowed by the threats of the fact that they are elected and we are unelected. We should not be cowed by the fact that they have made decisions already in the House and expect us to follow suit. With respect to the question of the scope of the bill, this is a bill about exempting particular parts of farming activity. One significant farming activity, which is crop drying, is untouched in the amendment proposed by Senator Delphon. To exclude part of the coverage is not by any means changing the intent of the bill. There are many, many examples of bills where senators have moved to excise coverage of items in bills that were sent from the House. Many, many examples, and I would encourage the clerk, who may now be doing some research on whether this, in fact, is a legitimate point of order, to request the colleagues to look into examples of numerous bills where senators have asked to strike out certain parts of bills that limit the overall coverage. That is exactly the same thing we're doing here today, and that is why this point of order is not valid.
Thank you. Senator Delphine, followed by Senator McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Of course, I salute Senator Berry and her new perspective on the way we should debate bills in the House of and the Senate, and the role of committees and the need for debates or the ways to prevent debates. That's interesting. To address a few points that were made by Senator Platt, well, I'll start for the first one. I remember that in the two previous parliaments, the House of Commons adopted two motions, not one, two motions, begging the Senate to adopt Saganash bill about UNDRIP and Rosa Ambrose bill, or his former leader, about the judge training. They said, we adopted these bills unanimously or so, and we beg you to adopt Senate. Senator Platt was one of those that was very offended by that. He said that it was threatening the independence of the Senate. So I think the same could be said today of that letter that was sent yesterday, and I certainly agree with what he said at the time about the independence of the Senate, and I still believe that he believes what he said at the time. I certainly believe what he said at the time. And scope of amendments, well, as you know, the ruling is always the same from the speakers. You can look in the books. There's a presumption that amendments are valid. This is the rule. What's the scope of an amendment? Well, let's look at previous discussions we had in the Senate over the last few years about discussions about Bill C-21, about guns, and the amendments that were made in committee. I'm kind of happy to hear what Senator Platt is saying this morning, because I guess that's going to be, I suppose, be applied furthermore when we discuss the new C-21 and the type of amendments that can be made to the bill, because I expect that it be consistent with the principles he's raising. I'll refer to Bill C-48, the tankers ban, the type of amendments that were made in committees, including with the support of the Conservative, to have a corridor. For example, Senator Miville-Deschênes will remember, instead of having a ban, it would be a corridor to let ships going. That was found perfectly acceptable to the Conservative. And let's look at the amendments that were done recently to the Broadcasting Act. So, quite frankly, I'm impressed by the abilities to make arguments this morning that runs contrary to whatever their behavior was. And in law, it's well known that when you try to find out what is the principle, you look at behavior. And past precedents establish the rules. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, sorry. Mr. Chair, this point of order is a very clever attempt to derail the debate this morning before us, but it's not a point of order. It's not a valid point of order. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator McDonald.
Yes, Chair. I agree with Senator Wu that we shouldn't be intimidated by, or cowed, as he put it, by the people in the House of Commons. However, and I understand some of the arguments and that Senator Delphine is making, but we all seem to be forgetting here that we all seem to be forgetting the opinion of the farmers here. It's the farmers who are going to be pinched here. Instead of us fighting back and forth about what we said about our own independence, it's the farmers going into this winter are going to be paying the tax and trying to keep their farms going, trying to keep their families going. And I think we should concentrate on that.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Senator Platt.
I will be very brief, Chair. First of all, I wasn't the one that initially proposed the point of order that Senator Delfond is now saying I made a clever attempt here. It was Senator Bury that did that, not I. I was supporting her. Secondly, I know that Senator Wu and Senator Delfond take great pleasure in standing on their soapbox and criticizing me whenever they have the opportunity. I was not being critical of them or anybody else in this committee, and quite frankly, they should stop their childish games about trying to find fault with me as opposed to trying to find fault with a piece of legislation. If they want to do that, that's fine. But, Chair, let's be civil here. Here's a couple of gentlemen who 96% of the time have voted with this government. If ever there is anybody that's been cowed by a government, that is these two individuals, and they have the nerve to start saying that I'm inconsistent with what I believe. I'm very consistent. I support every farmer in this country. Every farmer. I've grown up in a farming community. I know what the farmers are experiencing. I know that by these frivolous ways of stalling this bill on behalf of whoever has ordered them or instructed them to do that, because we all know that that has been the case. So if Senator Wu and Senator Delfond just simply want to filibuster and play around with this so that this doesn't get done, fine. We can do that. I will do that as well. And if they want to grow up and start acting like gentlemen and debate the merits of the bill as opposed to debating their love or lack of that for Don Plett, then, Chair, I'm willing to do that. So let's move on, Chair. I think you have a duty to do. I think there's been a suggestion that something is out of order. It was not made by me. It was made by another colleague, and I just simply supported it.
Any further debate?
Chair, I would just say that Senator Platt has leveled some personal attacks on both Senator Delford and I, talking about being childish and asking us to grow up. That should not be allowed in this committee. It should never be allowed. It should never be allowed in any Senate debate, and I wish you would call that out. On his last point and on Senator McDonald's point that we should listen to farmers, I agree. I agree that this is about farmers, and we all have to make our judgment about what's best for the farming sector, for the Canadian economy, and for the environment. But that has nothing to do with the point of order. And I'm sure, Chair, you understand that very well.
Thank you. Any further? Senator Delfond?
Just to conclude the remarks about the point of order, I refer you, Mr. Chair, to the summary of that bill as introduced in the House of Commons, and I read it. This enactment amends the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act to expand the definition of eligible farming machinery and extend the exemption for qualifying farming fuel to marketable natural gas and propane. My amendment doesn't change that. My amendment really will make will limit the scope of the amendments, but it doesn't change the fact that the bill is about amending the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, and it doesn't deny that.
Thank you. Any further debate? Yes, Senator
Chair, committee, I have been traveling across Ontario and other parts of the country and met many farmers, and my message from the farmer was very important to get this bill through before this winter. They needed this bill, not only for the pollution, for the climate change, but also for inflation and the critical condition now on our economy. So I hope the committee will work forward on getting this bill passed as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further debate? Colleagues, I'll take your comments under advisement, and I'd ask if you agree that we suspend for a few minutes while the clerk and I go and discuss this point of order. Is that fair enough? Yes. With that, is it agreed? Agreed. With that, suspend. to the point of order. The basic objective of Bill C-234 is to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act to expand the definition of eligible farm machinery, grain drying, and heating and cooling for livestock and qualifying farm fuels to include marketable natural gas. To remove structures from the bill as in to exclude barns and greenhouses, in my thinking, would be destructive to the bill. The structures themselves are essential to Bill C-234. Senator Delfon's amendment effectively reverses the principle of the bill. Since the amendment goes against the basic principle of the bill and does not reflect the decision made by the Senate at second reading, I'll deem it out of order. And while debate is allowed and welcomed in this committee, I find the amendment is inadmissible, and thus I rule in favor of Senator Bury's point of order. Yes.
As you may know, a similar amendment was proposed in the House of Commons at the committee study. It was defeated 6-5, but it was debated, and nobody thought it was against the point of order. It was a similar amendment. So, Mr. Chair, I ask that your decision be reconsidered by the committee.
So with that in mind, to find the notes, there is no debate on it, so my question put to the group is, shall the chair's ruling be sustained? And honorable senators, there's been a request. I believe we're going to do a recorded vote. I will first ask the clerk to name all the senators present who are entitled to vote at this time.
Honorable Senator Black, Honorable Senator Bury, Honorable Senator Cardozo, l'Honorable Senator Cormier, the Honorable Senator Cotter, the Honorable Senator Dalphon, the Honorable Senator Laboucan-Benson, the Honorable Senator MacDonald, l'Honorable Sénatrice Miville-Deschênes, the Honorable Senator O, the Honorable Senator Simons, l'Honorable Sénatrice Saint-Germain, and the Honorable Senator Wu, and the Honorable Senator Plett.
So if any member present does not wish to vote, you may withdraw from the table now. The clerk will now call members' names, beginning with the chair and followed by the remaining members' names in alphabetical order. Members should verbally indicate how they wish to vote by saying yea, nay, or abstain. And the clerk will then announce the results of the vote, and the chair will declare whether the ruling is sustained or defeated. So the question is, shall the chair's ruling be sustained?
The Honorable Senator Black.
Yes.
The Honorable Senator Bury.
Yes.
The Honorable Senator Cardozo. L'Honorable Senator Cormier.
No.
The Honorable Senator Cotter.
Abstain.
L'Honorable Senator Dalphon.
No.
The Honorable Senator Laboucan-Benson. No. The Honorable Senator MacDonald.
Yes.
L'Honorable Sénatrice Miville-Deschênes.
Non.
The Honorable Senator O.
Yes.
The Honorable Senator Plett.
Yes.
The Honorable Senator Simons.
Abstain.
L'Honorable Sénatrice Saint-Germain.
No.
The Honorable Senator Wu.
No.
So the,
Yeas, oui, 5, 5. No, non, 7, 7. Abstention, abstention, 2.
thank you. So the chair's ruling was not sustained. So we will now move to a debate on the amendment that was proposed. Any further debate on the amendment put forward by Senator Delphon? Yes. Senator Platt.
Well, as you, I'm sure, know, I strongly oppose the amendment. This bill has been carefully crafted, and I know that Senator Wu is going to be unhappy that I'm speaking again, but nevertheless, I will make my comments. This bill had the support of MPs from every political party. It was passed by a vote of 176 to 146, including all Conservatives, all of the NDP, all of the Bloc, and all of the Green. 3 brave Liberals who understand agriculture also voted for the bill, including the chair of the House of Commons Agriculture and Agri-Food Committee, Cody Blow, Malbec MP Heath MacDonald, and Egmont MP Robert Morrissey. There is no reason to try to amend this bill. It should be passed as written for a number of reasons, and I will detail some of them for you. As the committee heard repeatedly, there are no viable fuel options to replace propane and natural gas at this time. This was noted over and over again at committee. But I will give you one quote from Ian Boxall, president of the Agriculture Producers Association of Saskatchewan, when he said, "While technologies like hydrogen, solar, wind, biomass, and geothermal hold promise, they remain limited in their application due to our unique environmental conditions and our vast geography." Colleagues, I would argue that on the basis of the evidence presented at committee and by briefs that were submitted, this amendment is nothing but frivolous and will do nothing except punish farmers. Farmers who have been punished over and over again. And here we have a group of senators who wants to continue to add to their misery. Secondly, the carbon tax is supposed to send a price signal to incentivize transition to lower carbon emitting fuels. But because there are no alternate fuel options, this price signal simply does not work when it comes to propane and natural gas used for agricultural purposes. For this reason alone, the exemption for buildings is just as needed as the exemption for grain dryers. Thirdly, I would note that the government has already acknowledged that the carbon tax on the agricultural use of propane and natural gas should be returned directly to farming businesses when it introduced the existing rebate. Here's what the government said in their 2021 Economic and Fiscal Update. Recognizing that many farmers use natural gas and propane in their operations and consistent with the budget 2021 commitment, the government proposes to return fuel charges proceeds directly to farming businesses in backdrop jurisdictions via a refundable tax credit starting for the 2021-22 fuel charge year. The problem is, as noted by multiple witnesses, the rebate is too blunt of an instrument. The exemptions are needed for both grain dryers and for heating buildings. Fourthly, don't forget that diesel fuel and gasoline, which make up 85% of agricultural fuel emissions, are already exempted from the carbon tax. Yet both propane and natural gas produce less emissions than either gasoline or diesel fuel. Senator Delphon is suggesting we should incentivize farmers to stop using propane or natural gas to heat their buildings and use gasoline or diesel fuel instead. It is incoherent public policy to tax the lower carbon options while providing an exemption to the higher carbon fuels. While federal programs such as agricultural clean technology, propane, and tax rebate programs are aimed at providing relief to farmers from the fuel charges for natural gas and propane, these programs have often proven difficult to access and are further oversubscribed. The programs are welcomed and needed, but they reach only a small percentage of farmers. You cannot make the argument that the exemption should not apply to buildings because there are other programs in place to help farmers. These programs are simply insufficient. 7, the sixth thing to realize is that refusing to provide the exemption for buildings provided in Bill C-234 places Canadian farmers at a competitive disadvantage in comparison to international competitors who are not subject to fuel charges. Farmers receive the world price for their product and cannot pass on the cost of the carbon tax on either grain drying or for heating and cooling of their buildings. The exemption on buildings is as critical as that for them as the one for grain dryers. And finally, this same amendment was proposed by MP Ryan Turnbull at the House of Commons, which has already been suggested here, and was defeated. It is a waste of time for this committee to send them the amendment from the House of Commons that they will just simply defeat. This is, colleagues, a waste of time, which is, of course, what Senator Delfont and Senator Wu want to do. And they now have the support of the government, who has always said they'll stay out of private members' business. And now the government is here voting on a bill. We are wasting time, and that time is costing farmers money. Every one of you, colleagues, have farmers in your constituencies, in your provinces. You are costing them money. Colleagues, exemptions to carbon tax are not a bug. They are a feature. They already exist because they are necessary to ensure that the policy is targeted and effective and does not create undesirable results. The exemption on buildings is essential for the reasons I have listed, and I hope you will support our agricultural sector by defeating this amendment. And just one last comment. The committee heard repeatedly that alternative fuels are not available for propane and natural gas. Improving efficiencies for propane and natural gas is not the intent of this bill, as farmers are fully incentivized to reduce their heating costs because it saves them money. So farmers will do what they can to create less emissions. It saves them money. And here we have the government coming to the table to try to defeat a private member's bill. I just find that objectionable, and I'll certainly be voting against the amendment, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Platt. Senator Cotter, and I remind folks that we're debating the amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Wu.
I'm going to come at this conversation slightly differently from Senator Platt, but I'm going to end up in the same position. And my view is actually consistent with each of the amendments that may get provided consideration. So I think I will just make one intervention and have it applicable to the other amendments. I listened to all the testimony that was presented here and read all of the materials. I think it's clear that this amendment would assist farmers with respect to improving their revenue cost situation to some degree. My own sense is that the proponents of the bill described the significance of it. It is not insignificant, but it's not overwhelming. The parallel to that is that on the subject of climate change, greenhouse gases, and CO2 emissions, it is equally a modest issue. It is not an overwhelming issue. My second point is that I would prefer the bill to have a built-in incentive to move not just to save costs, but toward more climate-friendly fuels. But I recognize that once we begin to tinker with this bill, we produce the consequences that Senator Platt spoke about. And I don't want to see that happen. So for me, I'm supportive of the government's initiatives with respect to greening our economy and the efforts that they have in mind with respect to climate change. And so that's a legitimate and large policy perspective that deserves consideration. Secondly, though, as the government says from time to time, this implementation toward a greener economy requires equitable implementation. One of the consequences of a grand national regime with respect to a green economy is that it is sure to land disproportionately on different sectors of the economy and different parts of the country. Agriculture is one of the ones that is most vulnerable for that inequitable burden, and aspects of government policy have moderated that. Related to that, not just with respect to individual farmers and producers, but the whole sector of agriculture and agri-food is seen by this government as a pillar of the economy going forward. And in my view, this modest adjustment to the greenhouse gas tax burdens is a signal of our commitment to that economy and to the people who deliver the product. I'm hopeful, and I would have preferred, as I said, a degree of incentivization in this bill for pieces of this small part of the puzzle to have that explicit in the document, but its consequences, I think, would be negative and unfortunate. Let me also say that support for agriculture and agriculture producers and the agri-food economy by this bill is small in dollars, but it is a rich contribution to appreciating the contribution that this sector makes, and a modest olive branch to those who sometimes are frustrated with government policy in this country. Let me stop there. The bottom line is that I will vote against the amendment, and the other amendments, even though, unlike Senator Plett, I would regard them as delivered in kind of a good faith and constructive way. I think in the present circumstances, they would be unwise to be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cotter. Senator Wu.
Thank you, Chair. I thank Senator Cotter for his nuanced assessment of this bill and his honesty with all of us on not only this amendment and subsequent amendments. He has sat through all of our hearings and has heard the range of information that we've received. Senator Plett has not sat through any, or certainly not many, of the hearings, and he's provided us a one-sided summary of the findings. For example, Senator Cotter is quite right in pointing out that, on the one hand, the GHG impact of this particular sector, barns and dryers, is relatively small in the scheme of things. But he's also pointed out, and this is something Senator Plett omitted, that the share of the cost of natural gas in total farm costs is very, very small. The estimates we've received from our witness testimony and from official research suggest that it's well under 1%. Furthermore, this piece of information has not been shared, but I know Senator Cotter is aware of it. The price of natural gas has fallen substantially over the last 10 years or more, and could perhaps fall even more. So the substantive impact of having natural gas and propane subject to greenhouse gas pricing is relatively minor for the farmers. Not to trivialize this point, but it was heard in testimony, and it's something we should remember. I also deeply appreciate Senator Cotter's comments on equitability and the job of ensuring that a national policy does not, the burden of a national policy such as greenhouse gas pricing does not fall excessively on one set of Canadians compared to others. And I would just encourage Senator Cotter and others to reflect on the fact that if this bill does pass in its current form, it will apply only to backstop jurisdictions. And there will be a built-in inequality for the other jurisdictions that are part of the national GHG pricing plan, and for which the farmers are putting in a different kind of effort to reduce their GHG emissions. So that inequality will be extent if this bill is passed. With respect to the argument that this is a relatively small exemption that won't make a huge difference, in absolute terms, that may be correct, but we would be very naive if we were to assume that if this bill passes, it doesn't create both the political argument and also the sectoral interest in carving out exemptions in many other sectors. We know already that the sponsor of the bill in the House is against the carbon tax. Well, the party is against the carbon tax. It's against greenhouse gas pricing. The mantra is to axe the tax. And it would be extremely naive of all of us to think that if this bill goes through, that mantra, that call, that rally will not be magnified and that it will not spread to other sectors that also seek exemption. What we are trying to do here in proposing some amendments, in pushing back on some of the propositions put forward in this bill, is on the one hand to recognize that farmers have a special challenge in terms of reducing their propane and natural gas use. The mechanism that's been offered already to mitigate some of those burdens is the refundable tax credit. Later in our discussion, I hope to offer an observation. Perhaps it can be turned into policy at some point in the future, to offer an observation that encourages the government to refine the refundable tax credit so that it is better targeted at the farms that use propane and natural gas for crop drying. And so, Chair, just to again thank Senator Cotter for his comments, to offer a few counterpoints to his observations, and to encourage us to go to the vote, to the question on this First Amendment from Senator Delphorn.
Thank you, Senator Wu. Senator Simons, followed by Senator McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I find myself deeply torn here because as deputy chair of this committee, I did sit through every bit of evidence and I heard all of the testimony. We asked experts in grain drying equipment engineering what the potentials were for there to be viable alternative forms to dry grain. And what we heard, actually quite to my surprise, and I suspect to the surprise of others around the table, is that there are no credible, viable alternatives for grain drying that will be market ready anytime in the near future. And so to me, that made a pretty strong case for the exemption for grain drying technology. The evidences in terms of barn heating and greenhouse heating are considerably less strong. There are alternatives, and especially when it comes to greenhouses, there are already compensations in the tax system for people who use natural gas and propane to heat their greenhouses. And so I think I was probably the first person around the table who actually asked a witness what would happen if we carved out an exemption only for grain drying and not for buildings. And so, you know, the logic of Senator Delphon's amendment is pretty straightforward. That said, I keep going back to the testimony we heard from government officials about why the exemptions were set up the way they were in the first place. And the answer, which I still find disconcerting, is because that's how British Columbia set them up. And British Columbia became the model for the entire rest of the country, with no consideration of the fact that British Columbia's climate is considerably more temperate than the climate of the prairies or of parts of Ontario. I realize, of course, that if the prairie provinces had maintained or created their own carbon taxes, they would have been able to exempt whatever they liked. And the irony is that, you know, Alberta in particular, which had a robust carbon tax scheme of its own and gave it up, is now vulnerable to having its carbon tax policy set in Ottawa. You would think as Albertans we would want to do that in-house, but we opted not to. And so, I mean, the logic of Senator Delphon's amendment is inassailable on its face. On the other hand, I really do worry that it puts farmers who farm in some of the most, you know, unforgiving climates in a very invidious position because they're working with a model that was never designed with their needs in mind.
Thank you. Senator McDonald?
Yes, just reflecting on what Senator Wu talked about, and, we shouldn't be backpedaling on the carbon issues. Well, farmers are already exempt on diesel and gas, which the Liberals did themselves. So the Liberals axed that tax. So that argument doesn't hold any water. And I just don't understand why. I just think we should be putting the best interest of the farmers here. It's October in this country. We're about to go into winter. And I just don't think the argument is strong enough when they've already made exemptions in the same vein. So I think we should. I'm also surprised. I have to say I'm also surprised and shocked, Mr. Chair, that your ruling was overruled. I've been here for 14 years. I haven't experienced this myself.
Senator McDonald. I have no other. Senator Delphine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. On the last point of Senator McDonald, I think I could remember a ruling by Senator Ouzakos that was overruled by the chamber, including by his colleagues. That being said, let's go to the substance of the amendment. The amendment is from the sponsor of this bill is an MP from Ontario, MP Lobb, and he said himself before the House of Commons, and I quote, "If you look at the heating of barns, it is moving lockstep with the innovations that are heating a home, a commercial building, or an industrial building, because it only makes financial sense," end of quote. Nobody denies that buildings are more efficient and they are heating different technologies, and it's available. We know there's a farm in Alberta which is run without being connected to the grid whatsoever, not using natural gas, not using propane. So we know that there are alternatives. We know that when some programs were set up by the government, they were oversubscribed because farmers wanted to get the subsidy in order to do the things. We know that making a farm more efficient by proper air circulations, by having a heat pump, by having solar panels, it's all available in the market now. So even the sponsor of the bill recognized that. So what is being proposed here is to say, well, yes, but let's give a break to the farmer, because that's at the end what is being said. We were told before the committee, not only by the parliamentary budget officer, but also from representative of the grain drying in Ontario, which incidentally, grain drying in Ontario is done by third parties at 60%, which means that this bill will not affect the largest province, which is using the largest number of grain drying, because 60% of their grains are dried by third party and they will not qualify. And they said this will make us uncompetitive with the farmers that have a dryer at home. So, you know, this bill is far from being perfect. It's being drafted on the corner of a table, and it's being a disguised attempt to axe the tax. And we know which policy, which party stands for that policy. So, but the issue here is really, what does the evidence that was led before the House of Commons and before this committee, what does it say? It says that there's a major distinction to make between grain drying, where efficiencies exist and are available, but new technology is not necessarily ready, and heatings where efficiencies and new technologies exist. And if we open the door here to say, well, you can, your barn, well, it's good for, it will give a break to the farmer. A break, incidentally, as Senator Wu referred to, and the evidence I've shown, is less than 1%. The parliamentary budget officers refer even maybe to 0.4% of the cost of energy drying grains on the cost of operating of the whole operation. So we're not talking about $1 million a break. We're talking about $1 billion over 8 years. That's what is the price, assuming that it goes to the full price on when it's $170 per ton. So, colleagues, logic and evidence go the same direction. They say there's a clear distinction between heating your barns and drying your grain, and that's even acknowledged by the sponsor of the bill. And my amendment is an amendment that was also made in the House of Commons, as pointed out by Senator Platt. It was defeated 6-5. So he forgot to mention the number. And so this is the reality. We're the sober second out. We have the evidence. We should not be moved by politics and by the agenda of a political party. We should be moved by the evidence. And the strong evidence is that there's a clear distinction between grain drying and heating barns. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. Thank you, Senator Delphine. Senator Platt, followed by Senator McDonald.
Well, let me start by saying that Senator Delphine is absolutely correct, correct when he says I'm a conservative. I'm a proud conservative. Very proud of our policies, very proud of what the Conservative Party of Canada has done for our country over the last 150 some odd years, with the first Prime Minister of the country being a Conservative Prime Minister. But this has nothing to do with whether we're Conservatives, Liberals. This bill was passed unanimously by the Bloc, the NDP, and the Green. How much further apart could we get on environmental issues than between the Conservatives and the Greens? So the only people that are making this a political issue are the people that 96% of the time vote in favor of this particular government. So I don't know why we need to do it why we don't do it on the merits of whether this is good legislation or not based on whether or not we support the Liberals or the Conservatives. Both Senator Wu and Senator Delphine are talking about how negligible this is. But it's only negligible, according to them, when it comes to the farmers. Well, how about to the bill? It's also then negligible to the bill. But for some reason, it's tremendously important in the bill. When you listen to some of the opponents of this bill, you are left with the clear impression that doing so will somehow destroy the impact and the effectiveness of carbon pricing. This is simply false, colleagues. We are talking about a very small, focused exemption which is being applied in a specific area where the carbon tax does not fulfill its public policy purpose, but in fact does the opposite. While opponents like to suggest that providing an exemption for propane and natural gas for agricultural purposes will be like removing the fateful piece in a game of Jenga, which brings the whole structure crashing down, or blocks, or whatever you want to play. The reality is actually quite the opposite. Exemptions are part of the design of the policy. Colleagues, as I said earlier, exemptions are not a bug, but a feature of a carbon tax system. They are necessary to ensure that the policy is targeted and effective and does not create undesirable results. Exemptions exist for farmers and fishers, along with the additional targeted relief for residents of rural and small communities, users of aviation fuels in the territories, greenhouse operators, power plants that generate electricity for remote communities, and Indigenous peoples. Bill C-234 is not breaking new ground. It is one small but necessary tweak to the existing suite of exemptions, which will have no impact on the effectiveness of the carbon tax, but will have a significant impact on the ability of farmers to compete on a level playing field and continue to adopt more efficient technologies. This will help Bloc farmers. This will help NDP farmers. This will help green-supporting farmers. This will not just help Conservative Senator Delphine. I assure you, the Conservatives farmers that vote Conservative will benefit from this. So will farmers that vote Bloc or Liberal. So let's stop with Conservatives are opposed to carbon tax, so we must pass this amendment. That just simply doesn't hold water. If you have an amendment that has merit, argue it on the base of merit, not on who's opposing it.
Thank you, Senator Platt. Thank you, Senator Platt. we have Senator McDonald followed by Senator Wu, and then we're going to cut the debate and move to the to the vote. Senator McDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Senator Delphine, you mentioned heat pumps. I put heat pumps in my home. I know how much they cost and how they work. You know you need 100 heat pumps for a 100,000 square foot chicken barn. You know how much that would cost? I mean, we got to get practical here. We got to be realistic in what we're dealing with. And again, both the Green Party and the NDP supported this. So it's not a partisan, it's not a partisan initiative. So I think we have to get away from the partisan stuff and deal with the issue, which is helping farmers survive in this environment, this economic environment. We know how much food is costing in this country, and now if you're going to add to the cost of running a farm, you're going to add to the cost of food, and we're going down the wrong road. I think we have to reassess this.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Senator Wu, and then we will turn to the vote.
Let me first make a comment on the presence of ex officio members on this committee who have parachuted into our clause by clause, not having sat through.
Point of order, Chair. Yes, point of order. Chair, this debate is about an amendment, not about whether I'm talking on a point of order, sir. This debate is about an amendment, not on whether I have the right to be here. We have rules in the Senate that Senator Wu does not like. We understand that. He's very clear and he has every right. The difference between Senator Wu and I are clearly on a number of political issues. But the biggest difference is that I agree with his right to his opinion and I agree with my right to mine. We have rules in the Senate that allow myself as an ex officio to be here, and in this case, whether or not I agree with the government coming here to debate a private member's bill, the rules also allow for Senator Levick and Benson to be here. That is not debatable, Chair, and I respectfully ask that you keep the debate to the issue at hand. That is not whether or not I have the right to be here.
Debate on point of order. Debate on the point of order. And which is that Senator Platt himself objected to the representative of the government voting in a certain way in his earlier intervention when it was not on that very question. So it's pot calling the kettle black. But I've made my point. There's an asymmetry and an unfairness in the way ex officio status is granted to only certain groups and not others. And I want to move on to, if you will agree, Chair, I'd like to move on to the debate on the amendments.
So I need to rule on the point of order, and to that point, I will just ask us to keep in mind the amendment. We have one more speaker, and then we will move to the vote. Thank you. Senator Wu, go ahead.
The question of whether exemptions are part of the policy is an important one. And while there are, in fact, exemptions built into the policy, it's well understood by the best economists, the best analysts of carbon pricing, of greenhouse gas pollution pricing, that exemptions are a suboptimal, a less preferable way of designing a pollution pricing scheme than rebates, income rebates, rebates for lost revenue, rebates that deal with output-based pricing. Those are the preferred mechanisms in the design of a pollution pricing scheme. And in fact, we have such a measure when it comes to natural gas and propane, where the government, in a previous budget bill, put in place a refundable tax credit to give back all of the proceeds of pollution pricing on natural gas and propane on farms. Every single cent. Now, that amount is given to the sector as a whole and not necessarily in proportion to the amounts used by particular farms and grain dryers, but that is in order to preserve the price incentive. What that means is that farms that make more effort, that for farms that have already invested in efficiency measures on their crop drying operations or on their barns, they will benefit more than the farms that haven't done those things. But that's the whole point of a price incentive. And so I think it's deeply misleading to suggest that exemptions are, in fact, the desirable pathway for a carbon pricing scheme. And I just want to make one point that is really important as we think about this amendment and all the other amendments. The argument put forward by proponents, and we've heard this many times from Senator Platt and Senator McDonald, is that there are no alternatives. In some senses, that is correct. But this is not simply about alternatives. The issue is about efficiencies. And the point of pollution pricing is not to drive you necessarily to a brand new technology, which may or may not exist. We hope something will come up. But is to encourage you to make all of the incremental changes that will improve your efficiency, even operating under existing technologies. Now, Senator Platt was not at all of the testimony, so he will not have heard from a number of witnesses that there are crop dryers that are 20, 30 years old. We heard from one of our star witnesses that he replaced his crop dryer only last year, I think it was. And he admitted that his previous appliance, his previous facility was, I think, more than 20 years old. Now, you need incentives to encourage farmers to make that change. And this is not about finding fusion or some kind of magic solution. It's about making incremental efficiency gains. And even if there are no clear alternatives to natural gas and propane today, there is a value in pollution pricing in encouraging farmers, whether in barns or in the crop drying sector, to make the changes that they can currently make with the current technology.
Thank you, Senator Wu. The amendment moved by the Honourable Senator Dalphon states that Bill C-234 be amended in Clause 1. Shall I read it fully? Would you like me to read it? Dispense, thank you very much. So is it your pleasure, Honourable Senators, to adopt the motion in amendment? And we're just going to do a voice vote. So we'll ask you to carry on.
Right. The Honourable Senator Black.
No.
The Honourable Senator Bury. No. The Honourable Senator Cardozo.
Yes.
L'Honorable Senateur Cormier.
Oui.
The Honourable Senator Cotter.
No.
L'Honorable Senateur Dalphon.
Oui.
The Honourable Senator MacDonald.
No.
The Honourable Senator Laboucan Benson. L'Honorable Sénatrice Miville Deschênes.
Oui.
The Honourable Senator O.
No.
The Honourable Senator Platt. The Honourable Senator Simons.
Yes.
L'Honorable Sénatrice Saint-Germain.
Oui.
The Honourable Senator Wu.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeas pour 7, nays contre 6. Abstention, 1.
So I'll declare the motion and amendment carried. So the amendment has been adopted, and so shall Clause 1 as amended carry? Thank you. Carried. Carried as amended. Carried as amended.
We don't need a digression, do we? We should move on.
Let's move.
Yeah,
Let's move forward. So Clause 1 as amended is carried. Moving forward now, shall Clause 2 carry? Senator Wu.
honorable colleagues, I move that Clause 2 on page 2, that Bill C-234 be amended in Clause 2 on page 2 by replacing lines 22 and 23 with the following, I quote, 2 brackets 1 subsections 1 brackets 2.1 and brackets 5 come into force on the day that is the 3rd anniversary.
On debate, Senator Wu.
Thank you, Chair. You will all know that the bill currently has a sunset period of 8 years, at which time the exemptions expire unless there is a GIC order plus some motions passed by the House and by the Senate. The 8-year time period is somewhat arbitrary. It has been defended as the period of time that is necessary for new technology to emerge, perhaps, or for farmers to come up with alternate solutions. But colleagues, what is going to happen in the 8-year period is that the pollution price is going to go up. It's going to go up by $15 a year, and I believe by the end of the 8-year period, it will be $170 per ton from what is currently $65 a ton, I believe. That is a very big jump, and for farmers who have not made any adjustments and who may not have alternatives to turn to, or have not prepared for alternatives to turn to at the end of the 8-year period, that's a very large adjustment to make, and one that could be debilitating. It will also, of course, create a lot of pressure to extend the exemption regardless of the technology available. This amendment proposes a shorter time frame for 2 reasons. The first is to not allow such a long lag time to transpire, which could increase the adjustment difficulty for farmers. But the second and more substantive agreement is that there already is a review of the pollution price scheme planned for 2026. This will be carried out by Environment and Climate Change Canada. It will look at the entire pricing regime, which will encompass consultations and engagement with provincial, territorial, and indigenous stakeholders. It will look at the impacts on interjurisdictional and the concerns raised by my colleagues. It will look at the impacts on international competitiveness from pollution pricing. I'm happy to provide more context, but in the interest of time, those are the key arguments in favor of a shorter sunset period. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Wu. Further debate? Senator Plett.
Thank you, Chair.
And again, I'll remind you, speaking to the amendment.
There is no evidence provided at committee that indicated the sunset timeframe should be changed from 8 years to 3 years. None. In fact, as noted by Professor Lubitz, Associate Professor of the University of Guelph School of Engineering, we're looking at a minimum of 6 to 8 years and perhaps longer. It may surprise Senator Wu that I actually am capable of reading evidence that witnesses have brought and also listening to committee meetings from my office. So although, as he says, I wasn't here for every meeting, I have a pretty good idea of what went on at the meetings. In response to a question by Senator Simons about certain technologies, whether they would be available within 8 years, Professor Lubitz said the following: "For the technologies that are under development, it's difficult to say. We mentioned the heat pump technology. We are looking at that. Others are working on biomass and other things as well. One could argue some of these are close to being ready for small-scale prototype experimental use. But I think the big question is, when will they be ready for large-scale deployment? I believe some of these will be ready within the 8-year window, but not in the next year or two. Our project will not reach that in the next year or two, but it has potential in the next 6 or 8 years. Similarly, I am not aware of other technologies that are ready for that large-scale deployment in the next year or two. It takes a long time to go through these steps to roll out and scale up. This is a large infrastructure that takes a long time to build, test, and build again. Professor Singh, Senior Research Chair of Agricultural Engineering and Technology at Lethbridge College, echoed the uncertainty of Professor Lubbock's saying, "I don't know if it takes 3 years or 5 years, and if it's available in a way that farmers can use. Maybe or maybe not. I'm sorry, I don't have a clear answer for that." In their brief to the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food, the Agri-Food Innovation Council said the following: "Research and innovation on the use of alternative renewable energy shows significant promise for farming operations. However, the technology is not at a point where it is viable for many farming operations. Further research and new innovations are needed to meet the needs of the agri-food sector. As alternative sources of energy sources are available, or identified, it would be important to think about scalability, affordability, and adoption. Does this mean that we will never get to the point where we're able to replace propane and natural gas? No, but most experts indicate that we would need at least a decade before we are able to have workable, proving, affordable, and scalable alternatives." These are professional colleagues. Colleagues, this amendment is not supported by any evidence, and in fact, this should be defeated, and move this bill forward without this amendment. Thank you.
Any further debate? Colleagues, Senator McDonald.
I just want to make the point, Senator Root raised that the 8-year limit was arbitrary. Why is it any more arbitrary than the 3-year limit you're proposing?
When the meeting stops, I will be starting the last sitting meeting for Bill C-234.
You may well find that the uncertainty that Senator Platt has rightly commented on, the uncertainty around technological process, may be cleared up. We do not know. All I was able to get from Senator Platt's recitation of some of the testimony is that people don't know. Could not 1 and 2 years, probably 5 or 6 years. The middle sounds like 3 to me. Don't forget that adopting this amendment to have the sunset at 3 years rather than 8 does not preclude that the exemptions can be extended. It does not preclude that from happening. It simply allows for us to use a established, mandated, serious review process that will be conducted by ECCC to use the findings of that formal official review to make a judgment on what to do with further exemptions.
Thank you, Senator Roux. Senator Delphine, followed by Senator McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to say that I support the amendment, and just to make maybe precisions about committee evidence, on September 26, Mrs. Cole-Fergus from the National Policy Manager, Climate Action Network Canada, said that she disagreed with the 8-year timeline as it undermines innovation. She noted that demand for the agricultural clean technology programs is outstripping supply now, and that there's this long deadline brings us to postpone people that are willing to consider alternative to keep going with old equipments for a longer period. Furthermore, 8 years take this sunset
provisions beyond the critical important date of 2030, which is the target date to reach some milestone. So we are here saying, because remember, this is the third iteration of that attempt to have no tax for farmers. It started in 2020, where they were asking for 8 years. So that would be the end in 2028. Now we're asking for 8 years in 2023, which brings us to 2031, so way beyond the target date of 2030. So I think this is a consequential, a logical amendment. Furthermore, if in 2030, after the comprehensive review is completed, there's adjustment to be made, the government will be in position to make the adjustments. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Delphine. Senator McDonald.
Senator Wu said it'll be cleared up in 3 years. Yeah, we'll have an election in 3 years. You can be rest assured it will be cleared up.
Thank you. Senator Platt.
Well, you know, Senator Wu said all he could get from my comments that I had made is we don't know. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but something along that line, and that he couldn't get timelines out of what I said. Well, here's in fact what I said. I believe some of these will be ready within the 8-year window. Very clear, within the 8-year window. It has potential in the 6 or 8 years. Most experts indicate we would need at least a decade. I don't know how much clearer that can be, that 3 years isn't an acceptable time frame. Here we have experts who know, and yet somehow around this table, we say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. We'll make it something else. It's just at least have the expertise before you come forward with an amendment. And you don't, with respect, the senator does not have the expertise. The witnesses do.
Senator Platt. Anything further in debate? It is moved by the Honourable Senator Wu that Bill C-234 be amended in Clause 2 on page 2 by replacing lines 22 and 23 with the following: 2 bracket subsections 1 bracket 2.1 and bracket 5 come into force on the day that is the 3rd anniversary. Is it your pleasure, Honourable Senators, to adopt the motion and amendment? I think we'll do the voice or the standing vote again, name vote going forward.
Right. The Honourable Senator Black.
No.
The Honourable Senator Beery.
No.
The Honourable Senator Cardozo. L'Honorable Sénateur Cormier.
Oui.
The Honourable Senator Cotter.
No.
L'Honorable Sénateur Dalphon. The Honourable Senator Laboucan Benson.
Oui.
The Honourable Senator MacDonald.
No.
L'Honorable Sénatrice Miville-Deschênes.
Oui.
The Honourable Senator Platt.
No.
The Honourable Senator O.
No.
The Honourable Senator Simons.
No.
L'Honorable Sénatrice Saint-Germain.
Oui.
The Honourable Senator Wu.
Yes.
Yeas, pour, 7, 7. Nays, contre, 7, 7.
Being a tie, it's defeated. The amendment is defeated. So colleagues, shall Clause 2 carry as is?
Agreed.
Thank you. It being 5 to the hour, shall we continue for 5 more minutes or? Yes. All right. Shall the title, sorry, Senator. Yes, Senator Wu.
There is an amendment, Amendment 4, that I would like to move in your package. It's Clause 2. Pages 2 and 3. May I move the amendment?
Please.
Yeah.
Senator Wu, you have an
Yes.
amendment?
Yes, that Bill C-234 be amended in Clause 2, A on page 2 by replacing lines 24 to 37 with the following, quote, of the day on which this act comes into force, unquote. B on page 3 by deleting lines 1 to 9.
Thank you. Senator Wu on debate. Senator Wu.
These clauses in their original form allow for the exemptions in C-234 to be extended beyond the sunset period simply by a resolution from the Governor and Council and by motions of the House of Commons and the Senate. They do not require the same kind of scrutiny and investigation by either the other place or by the Senate. There is a certain automaticity in the current proposal to have exemptions extended. I believe that now that we are looking at an 8-year sunset period, an 8-year period that I've already argued will make it more difficult for farmers to turn away from, more difficult politically to turn down, and hence more pressure on the exemptions to be continued, that we should not, as the Chamber of Sober Second Thought, allow for an extension of these exemptions to be able to go through with such ease. I am not arguing, to be clear, that we are eliminating the possibility of the exemptions being continued, but they should be done in a normal way, that we do things in the Parliament of Canada, which is to have a bill to bring about the extension, to collect fresh evidence, to have debates both in the House and in the Senate, and then on the basis of the merits of the new legislation to make that decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before we hear from Senator Platt, and we are coming to the end, I do want to note that in the record, it's moved by the Honourable Senator Wu that Bill C-234 be amended in Clause 2, A on page 2 by replacing lines 24 to 37 with the following, of the day on which this act comes into force, and B on page 3 by deleting lines 1 to 9. Senator Platt, and then we'll end the debate until the next meeting. Senator Platt. Or...
Well, first of all, Chair, I believe we should finish this we should finish this bill. That's what we were going to do, and we're minutes away from finishing a bill. I would find it extremely wasteful that we would come back for another meeting. And thank you. You can speak when you have the mic. Right now, I do. I would find it extremely wasteful that we would adjourn at this point when we are minutes away. This has been another delay tactic by Senator Wu to now do something through the back door that he couldn't do through the front door. So I will not be debating this until I have agreement that we are going forward to finish the bill today.
Senator St. Germain.
I was there first. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill is important for the farmers, but also for Canadian economy and for us. And I do believe that we need more time to continue because we don't have enough time. Many of us, it's my case, have to go to other appointments. So unfortunately, I don't have enough time to make a decision on the further amendments and the observations that we still have to study. And if I may, I hope that the next meetings will be respectful on all sides of the colleagues, their views, their vote, and their expertise.
Thank you. We do have a hard stop at 11 because there is another meeting in here, so it has to be turned around. So with that, colleagues, I thank you for your attention.
All right, everybody, I'm going to start the next video.
Debates today. I want to thank the folks behind us and the folks online that support us and have significantly supported us today, so, and our office colleagues as well. With that, colleagues, we will meet again on Tuesday evening at 6:30. That date is the Tuesday evening, October 25th, 24th.
I'm just loading up the last meeting.
I see we have quorum, and so I call to order this meeting of the Standing Senate Committee on Agriculture and Forestry. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming back. I'd like to begin by welcoming members of the committee and those watching this meeting in the room and on the World Wide Web. My name is Rob Black, and I'm Senator from Ontario and Chair of the Agriculture and Forestry Committee. I'd like to start by asking senators around the table to introduce themselves, starting with their Deputy Chair.
Paula Simons, Alberta Treaty 6 Territory.
Brent Cotter, Senator for Saskatchewan.
Yuan Pa Wu from British Columbia.
Mark Gold from Quebec.
René Dupuis, Division sénatoriale et Laurentides, Québec.
Raymond Saint-Germain, Québec.
Julie Miville-Deschênes, Québec.
Sharon Bury, Senator for Ontario.
Andrew Cardozo from Ontario.
Pierre Dalphon, Delormier, Division de Delormier, Québec.
Senator Don Plett, I'm from Landmark, Manitoba.
Victor O, Ontario.
David Wells, Newfoundland and Labrador.
Thank you, colleagues. Today, the committee will continue the clause-by-clause consideration on Bill 234, an act to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act. Before we begin, again, I'd like to remind senators of a number of points. Number one, if at any point a senator is not clear where we are in the process, please ask for clarification. I want to ensure that at all times we have the same understanding of where we are in the process. Number two, in terms of the mechanics of the process, when more than one amendment is proposed to move in a clause, amendments should be proposed in the order of the lines of the clause. Number three, if a senator is opposed to an entire clause, the proper process is not to move a motion to delete the entire clause, but rather to vote against the clause as standing as part of the bill. Some amendments that are moved may have consequential effects on other parts of the bill. It is therefore useful to this process if a senator moving the amendment identified to the committee other clauses in this bill where this amendment could have an effect. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for members of the committee to remain consistent in their decision-making. Number five, because no notice is required to move amendments, there can, of course, be no preliminary analysis of the amendments to establish which ones may be of consequence to others and which may be contradictory. Number six, if committee members ever have any questions about the process or about the propriety of anything occurring, they can certainly raise a point of order. As chair, I will listen to the argument or arguments, decide where there has been sufficient discussion, when there's been sufficient discussion on the matter or order, and make a ruling. And number seven, the committee is the ultimate master of the business within the bounds established by the Senate, and a ruling can be appealed to the full committee by asking whether the ruling shall be sustained. Number eight, I wish to remind honourable senators that if there is ever any uncertainty as to the results of a voice vote or a show of hands, the most effective route, and will likely move to this at most times, is to request a roll call vote, which obviously provides unambiguous results. Number nine, finally, senators are aware that any tied vote negates the motion in question. And 10, Are there any questions on any of the above? If not, we can now proceed. Is it agreed that the committee continue with the clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-234, an act to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act? Hearing full agreement, we'll proceed. During the committee's meeting on Thursday, October 19, the committee adopted Clause 1 of the bill as amended, and before we adjourned, Senator Wu moved and spoke to his amendment, a second amendment. That Bill C-234 be amended in Clause 2 on page 2 by replacing lines 24 to 37 with the following: of the day on which this act comes into force, and B on page 3 by deleting lines 1 to 9. So resuming debate on the amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Senator Platt, a point of order?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Chair, on what's today? Tuesday, on Thursday last, just before we adjourned, and Senator Wu indeed was speaking to an amendment, but with respect to the chair, you had asked before that, Chair, whether Clause 2 carry. And senators agreed that the clause would carry. That meant that debate on Clause 2 was over. Senator Wu then brought his amendment forward, and he did this after this section had already been adopted. Under the rules, both of committee rules and of Senate rules, we would have needed to revert because it had been carried. We had voted for it and it carried. In order to revert, Senator Wu would need unanimous consent, as the rules of the Senate state. The rules governing committee procedures are the same as the rules that govern proceedings in the chamber, as evidenced by the following. 12-20 brackets 5 says that no committee shall adopt procedures inconsistent with the rules and practices of the Senate. The rules of the Senate also dictate that items are to be called and dealt with in the numerical order as outlined by the following rule. 4-14, except as otherwise ordered by the Senate, other business shall be called in the following order, with bills, motions, and inquiries called in numerical order within their categories, and any other items within their categories in the order in which they were placed on the orders of the day. If a senator wishes to revert to an item that was previously dealt with, then it is standard procedure that leave must be given to do so. Senate Procedures and Practices outlines this practice at page 75 as follows. Items under other business are called by a clerk at the table in the order that they appear on the order paper. Leave of the Senate is required to deviate from this order. This, Chair, is also the case when a committee is considering clause by clause of a bill. We deal with each clause individually in numerical order. This is necessary to allow senators to get a clear idea of exactly what they are voting on and the relevance of each clause as they relate to each other and the bill as a whole. See House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, 2017, edited by Mark Boss and Andre Gagne. Use of unanimous consent. Committee decisions are usually made by a majority of the members present. However, with the agreement of all members present, a committee may reach a decision without following all the steps of a decision-making process. Unanimous consent has been used to depart from, vary, or abridge temporarily a committee rule, move a motion in respect of which notice was given by another committee member, and retake a vote on a matter that has already been put to a vote. See, for example, Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights minutes of proceedings, May 18th, 2013, meeting number 73. So in conclusion, Chair, Clause 2 of C-234 had already been dealt with and voted on by this committee as evidenced by the transcript of the last committee. Therefore, in my humble opinion, Chair, Senator Wu will require unanimous leave from this committee to revert back to Clause 2.
Thank you, Senator Platt. Further debate on the point of order. We have Senator St. Germain and then Senator Wu. Is that? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Platt, for raising this. I want to make sure that we have the excerpt when this Clause 2 would have been adopted. So could you ask the clerk to read it and to confirm that it was only related to Clause 2 and not to Clause 2, page 2?
You will get that. So I will get that for you before we.
Okay.
Senator Wu.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This point of order is out of order because it was not raised at the time when the matter came up. In fact, we had not only, with your consent and implicitly the consent of the committee, moved on to the amendment that I am proposing. I had already provided a fairly lengthy explanation of that amendment. I further recall that Senator Platt himself, observing that we were close to the time when the committee would have normally ended its deliberations, asked for an extension of time so that we could finish debating my amendment and other matters that were required by the clause-by-clause procedure. So on those grounds alone, Chair, that he, by his actions, consented to the consideration of my amendment, that he did not raise the point of order at that moment. It was not a timely objection. And the fact that no one else in the committee raised an objection, I believe this point of order should be ruled invalid. Thank you.
Senator Wu, we have the information for Senator St. Germain, and then we'll move to Senator Wells and then Senator Platt in that order. Go ahead.
These are from the transcripts from our meeting on Thursday, October 19. Shall Clause 2 carry? Senators agreed. The chair, thank you. It being 10:55, shall we continue for 5 more minutes? The chair, all right. Shall the title carry? Sorry, Senator Wu. Senator Wu, there is an amendment, Amendment 4, that I would like to move. It is in your package. It's Clause 2, page 2 and 3. May I move the amendment? The chair, please, Senator Wu, you have the amendment. Senator Wu, yes, I move that Bill C-234 be amended in Clause 2.
Thank you. That answers your question. Senator Wells and then Senator Platt.
Thank you, Chair. To Senator Wu's point of order regarding Senator Platt not being immediate in his point of order intervention, very often in chamber and even in committee, the processes aren't always picked up right away. Given that it was minutes left in the committee meeting, and I watched the committee proceeding. Given that it was minutes left in the committee meeting, and I think this is realistically the first time that this point of order could have been brought up and should have been brought up. A lot of times we have to confer in chamber with the clerks and find out exactly what the rules are. And just as Senator St. Germain asked about exactly what was said, a lot of times that these things have to be confirmed before it's realistic to bring a point of order, which Senator Platt did, I think, in a very timely manner.
Thank you. Senator Platt.
Well, thank you, and Senator Wells very capably already said part of what I was going to say. But indeed, a point of order can be raised at any time. and without question, there was some confusion as to what amendments, which is very common when we debate any clause by clause, that there is confusion, and the chair, last meeting, I believe, and at most meetings, the chair says if there is confusion, we can go back. When I look at the unrevised transcript here, again, it said the chair, being a tie, and this was to a different amendment, it defeated. You then said, shall clause 2 carry? Senator said, agree. The chair said, thank you. It being 10:55, shall we continue for 5 more minutes? Senator Plett, yes. The chair, all right. Shall the title, as the clerk said, care? Sorry, Senator Wu. So when I agreed to the extra minutes, 5 extra minutes, that was agreeing to finishing the discussion on the bill. There had been no amendment put forward when I agreed to that. And so a point of order can be raised at any time, and again, with the highest of respect to the chair, because again, these things are fluid. It would have been the responsibility of the chair, or in the case in the Senate, for the speaker to ask for leave before we revert, which is what happened here. We did revert, and you're right, there was no objection raised at that point. We were all working on what we were doing, and so the point of order can be raised at any time, and it's still valid today. We did not revert. That requires unanimous consent. It wasn't asked for. It wasn't given.
Senator Wu?
I think Senator Plett has confirmed that we, in fact, did move ahead in our discussion to consider my amendment with your permission and without the objections of any of the members. The discussion around whether or not we should continue as we approached the hour took place again after I had provided a brief explanation of the amendment. That too strikes me as a fait accompli, supporting that the case that this amendment was very much in order. If Senator Plett has an objection to your decision, I think that is a different kind of question that can be considered, that he may want to raise. But the fact that we've moved ahead on my amendment and had an initial discussion already suggests to me that we should be able to continue with it and to vote, as he has said before, on the substance of the matter rather than on the procedure. It seems this committee is becoming a bit like a rules committee rather than an agriculture committee, but we haven't even got to the substance of the matter at hand.
Any further discussion? Senator Plett?
No, go ahead,
Oh,
Senator Wells, if he wants to go first,
Wells.
please.
Thank you. Anytime in chamber and committee when we want to move beyond the normal proceedings, and the normal proceedings, as I believe I heard when the clerk read it, it was mentioning the title. Shall the title stand, or something like that? Yeah. So that was moving towards proceedings. Anytime there's a revert, it can't be assumed just because one senator starts speaking about what he or she wanted to happen prior. It can't be assumed that there was agreement. There's always the question to either the chair or to the speaker to revert. That's common in chamber, and it's common in committee, and it's common that it's rules that it would have to be unanimous. And of course, in this case, there was no request to revert. And I think there's
Senator Dupuis, and then Senator Dalphond.
Monsieur le Président, j'ai une question pour...
I have a question for you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm replacing Senator Petitclerc this evening, and so I want to make sure that I'm understanding what we're being asked to do and what you're being asked to do. So if I understand what the clerk read of the transcription of the last meeting, you allowed Senator Wu to start the discussion on his amendment, so that was your decision. So before trying to solve anything else, I think that if we want to challenge your decision, this needs to be solved first of all, and then we can decide who needs what in order to discuss an amendment. If I understand the rules correctly, and if I understand the authority that a chair of a committee has.
Thank you. Senator Delphont.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have the transcript with me, but maybe the clerk could be of assistance to me. Oh, yes, thank you, Senator Flett. I think we had an exchange about the time left, and I think I said at one point, and I think there's one more amendment after this amendment. It's not
the transcript.
We stopped the transcript before that, because I remember I said, you know, we don't have enough time. Yes, we denied to continue beyond the time, and I said there's even more. There's an amendment to consider, and there are observations to deal with, and that's what I said. And I said this can be done in 5 minutes.
You did say that. Senator Platt.
Sorry. I think that maybe there was a mistake at the chair, and we thought that it was over, but there was pending. This amendment was not considered yet, and there was another amendment after that, which is on page 3. And that reminds me of one night, and I forgot when it was, but Speaker Furry was in the chamber, something happened, and there was a misunderstanding about what was happening, and he said carried or something like that, and somebody stood up and said, no, I am not finished, I wanted to speak to it, and I ask you to reconsider, and the speaker took that under advisement, and he delivered a ruling the day after or second day after, and he said, there was some confusion in the chambers, and I could not follow exactly what's going on, and I understand now that the debate was not over, and I should not have said the motion was carried. And so it's Senator Furry that made that ruling. I forgot exactly when it was, but it's about 2 years ago, I think.
Thank you. I will be very clear. The transcript said we passed Clause 2. Yep. I want that very clear. I'm not saying I've made a decision, but the transcript says we agreed to pass Clause 2. Senator Platt, did you have something to say?
Well, I do. I mean, again, with respect to Senator Delphont, we can all say, well, something happened back here. I don't know for sure what it was, but I vaguely remember it, and it worked this way, and that worked in my favor. And so I really think we need to stick to facts. As you just said, Chair, you very clearly ruled that the clause had carried. There is no argument from any of us here that if there were amendments for further clauses or indeed observations that we discussed them, there's no argument with that. This is a discussion about going backwards. And the fact of the matter is, procedurally, we should have been asked whether we were giving leave. We weren't. And that is wrong. This, I don't believe, again, not wanting to make your life more difficult or easier, Chair, I don't believe that this is something that the Chair should even rule on. This is procedurally incorrect when the rules in the Senate say you are required to have leave to revert. The question needs to be posed. It wasn't posed. We didn't revert. We didn't give leave to revert. And I think today, in order to deal with Senator Wu's amendment, that question has to be posed. And I wouldn't put a lot of money on it, but it might get leave today. But that is the correct procedure, is to ask for leave to revert. We will not debate whether or not we should entertain other amendments going forward. We may speak against the amendments, but we certainly, Senator Wu or Delphont or anybody else has the right to introduce any other amendments that they want. They don't even have to have them tabled. They can do them off the floor. But this particular amendment, to deal with it, is simply not according to the rules. It is out of order, Chair, and for the sake of, I think I'm certainly starting to repeat myself, so I'll try to contain myself and not speak any further, but I believe it's out of order, and I believe we need to move on to the rest of the bill.
Thank you. Senator Simons?
You know, I think it's a shame that emotion is clouding what was clearly a very simple series of mistakes that we quickly corrected. The chair got out ahead of his skis. Senator Wu was perhaps not quick enough on the draw. Are those enough Western analogies for you? But it was my understanding that it was understood to be the unanimous consent of the committee that by consensus we went back. Perhaps that was not formal enough. I did not understand in the moment that anyone objected to the fact that we had de facto reverted. I don't know that it matters. I mean, if this is what is required to give all of our colleagues around the table comfort, then fine, let's do it. I mean, I don't know that it will make the outcome at the end any different, but I think it's unfortunate if what was a simple misunderstanding that in the moment was instantly clarified with the consent of everyone around the table is now retroactively made to sound like it was a much bigger issue than it was in the moment.
Thank you, Senator Simons, for making me feel better. Yeah. Senator Wells, followed by Senator Wu.
Well, to Senator Simons' point, there were two clear markers in the transcripts and in what I watched on the recording, and they were both formal and they were both recorded. The first one was shall clause 2 pass, or whatever the wording was, and it was all agreed. And then the next thing that I heard when the clerk continued on with the next order of business was about the title. That was a clear marker that the discussion of the clause had ended, and we were on to the next phase. Any desire to go back to beyond prior to those two markers would have required a request to revert, which obviously would have required unanimity, and neither of those two things happened. So I think it's, for me, it couldn't be more clear. There were two clear markers that moved on, and those two markers stood as long as there wasn't a request to revert, which happens frequently in the chamber, as we know.
Senator Wu.
Let the record show that a determined group of senators wants to avoid debating a motion, an amendment, that may be good or may be bad, and which they can, of course, argue against, and which is part and parcel of our job of scrutinizing this bill, that they would prefer to short-circuit that debate.
Excuse me, Chair, a point of order on this. This is not part of what we're discussing, his opinion on how we might treat it. That's not part of the point of order that was raised by...
Let me get to my point. And my point is that the outcome of this decision, which is focused on the rule, focused on whether or not it's even legitimate for this amendment to be tabled, will likely be the same as the outcome of the vote on the amendment. But the record will show that there was a focus more on the procedure and the rule than on the substance of the amendment that I am trying to put forward for all Canadians to consider. So, based on my expectation that whatever outcome is likely to take place on the amendment itself is the same as the outcome on this procedural question, I'm prepared, Chair. I'm prepared to ask for leave to go back to raise this amendment and invite all colleagues around the table to consider what signal you would be sending by trying to turn back denying leave to turn back an amendment that they can vote against anyway and which really is deserving of our debate and consideration.
Thank you, Senator Wu. Senator Wells.
Thank you. So it's if we're talking about the rules, then we should also talk about following the rules, which you clearly are trying to not do. And colleagues should also know that, Senator Wu, if you want to put more amendments in, frivolous as they might be, you can do them at third reading. Your right is still there, and that's also within the rules.
Thank you, Senator Wells. Senator Delphine.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. I retrieve my memory serves me not so bad. So I retrieved the exact excerpts. It was on March 2022. Senator Moncion stood up on the point of order. And after the speaker declared motion adopted. I rise on the point of order. You said that the motion was adopted, but then you went back on the decision because two senators rose. Since you had already made the decisions, may I know why we are reversing course? Question mark. The speaker. So our point was that it was carried, it was finished. The speaker's answer, you make a good point, Senator Moncion, but we had not moved on to other items. And there was some confusion as to what was happening. So I reverted back and recognized the two senators standing to be fair to what was going on. There was obvious confusion. You make a good point, and it will have been far more difficult for me to make that adjustment had we moved on. Thank you for raising that again. And then Senator Platt came and commented about the confusion. And I would like to refer also to Rule 10.5 of our rules, and I read it. That rule states, 10-5, at any time before a bill is passed, a senator may move for the reconsideration of any clause already carried. So if either two things, there was confusions and clause 2 was not carried, and therefore you were right, Mr. Chair, to say to Senator Wu, yes, there's more work to do. Go, you have the floor and explain your amendment, or somebody's challenging your decision today to let the debate resume, and then Senator Wu could move that he wants the committee to move back to consideration of Section 2, which, because it was already carried, so it could be reconsidered, and we will vote on it.
Senatrice Dupuis.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I heard correctly, the transcription of last week's discussions, you said that the clause was adopted, and you said sorry to Senator Wu, and you authorized Senator Wu to make the presentation of the amendment that he wanted to make. I don't think, I think it's a very difficult task to act as chair of a committee, but I don't think that we can require, because you authorized Senator Wu, you gave him the permission to present his amendment, it doesn't mean then, it's not as if you said, oh, I'm sorry, it's been adopted. If you want us to reconsider, you're going to have to present a request for reconsideration. That's one thing. But if I understand things correctly, that's not what happened. You, as chair, authorized Senator Wu to present his amendment. So we're not in the scenario that is being presented here this evening, in fact.
Senator Wells, or Senator Platt.
Well, I'm not sure what and again, with respect to Senator Wu, I'm not sure what he meant with let the record show in his comments when he was addressing something other than the point of order. But I'm quite happy to let the record show that we are trying to do this by the rules. I'm quite happy to let the record show that we are doing our level best to get a good piece of legislation across the finish line for Canadians, for farmers, and indeed for all of us when we know that these farmers are growing food for all of us. So I'm quite happy to let the record show what we're doing. But the fact of the matter is that we have rules in the Senate. And there are senators who want to change those rules, and I respect that entirely, that they want to change those rules. And there are ways to do that. We have a rules committee. There are ways to change the rules in the Senate. Senator Wells is correct that if Senator Wu believes this amendment has merit and that the senator should have the right to vote on it, he can introduce this amendment at third reading, and it will be debated there. And if senators there agree with it, it will pass. But we have rules here, and Senator Dupuy says that, well, you may have made a mistake. Well, you may have made a mistake. I'm not sure. I'm not the judge of that. All I know is that there are very distinct rules, and those rules do not say, unless somebody makes a mistake, then we do this. The rules are there. The rules are that after a clause passes, you move on to the next clause unless you get agreement to revert. That didn't happen. Those are the rules. Those are the facts. I'm not faulting you, Chair. I'm not faulting Senator Wu for not jumping to that a little sooner. Certainly we weren't going to. We weren't going to say, well, Chair, Senator Wu may have another amendment before we carry Clause 2. That would have been his responsibility, and he didn't do that. And I'm sure it was unintentional. But that's just simply the way it is. And so, Chair, I believe we need to move ahead with the rest of this bill. The rules are that we needed to revert. We didn't. And so I'm quite happy for you to ask us now whether we would agree to revert. Or if not, then I think we need to move forward.
We'll hear from Senator Wu, and then I'll move forward. Thank you, Senator Wu.
Well, in the interest of trying to find a path forward, let me refer to Rule 5-8 brackets 1 brackets K, which states that while a bill is under consideration, any element of the bill already agreed to can be reconsidered by way of a debatable motion. Based on this, even if a committee has carried a clause, it can decide to reconsider it. Now, I suspect there's an alignment between those who don't want to revert and those who don't like the amendment. So I'm prepared to move this debatable motion now that we go back to the clause in question so that I can table the amendment to the satisfaction of my colleagues. And if you give me that ability, I'm happy to do that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Before I suspend for a short time to confer, I want clarity myself. Is there a need for unanimity on the decision?
Not according to this rule.
Well, there is a reverting.
There's a requirement for unanimity on reverting.
It's a debatable motion.
I'm asking the clerk, is there a need to?
We can discuss during the break.
Okay, thank you. We'll discuss that, and okay, then I'll suspend. Very quickly, Senator.
You already had the gavel.
So the rule of 10-5 is also that at any time before a bill is passed, a senator may move for the reconsideration of any clause already carried.
Thank you.
That's what
We've heard
he's
that.
trying to do.
I'll take things.
Not reverting to an item on the order paper.
Thank you.
When we're down at item 14, and then we need unanimous consent to revert to item 7.
I will take it under advisement. We will suspend. the work that you folks do, and I'm proud of the work that our staff do and the clerks do. It's very much appreciated. So I want to say that up front. I'm prepared to rule on the point of order raised by Senator Plett. Page 138 of Senate Procedures and Practice state that Rule 10-5 provides that at any time before a bill is passed, a senator may move for reconsideration of any clause already carried. In addition, Rule 5-81K states that while a bill is under consideration, any element of the bill already agreed to can be reconsidered by way of a debatable motion. Based on this, even if a committee has already carried a clause, it can decide to reconsider it. The rules are clear, colleagues, in this respect, that a committee may reconsider a clause already carried. This can be agreed to by way of a debatable motion and does not require a leave. I therefore rule that the procedures followed in committee last week are in order and that the committee can resume clause-by-clause consideration of the bill. And so, resuming debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this amendment, in all of the commotion around the procedure, you will recall this amendment is about removing the ability for the extension of the exemption to be granted simply by an order in council together with motions passed in the House of Commons and in the Senate. This approach does not require a fresh piece of legislation to be debated in either place, and therefore would not require the same amount of scrutiny and care that would go into the consideration of a new bill. In addition to the matter of climate change being an existential concern, first of all for farmers, but for all of us, we should, I think, establish a threshold for extending the exemptions that is in keeping with the work we do in Parliament. And that would be to go through the normal process of the government of the day, in its judgment, after consultations, putting forward a bill that provides for an extension period of X number of years. If you would consider for a moment the counterfactual, which is the current version of the bill that allows for an extension simply by an order in council plus motions from the House and the Senate, I think you might agree that the current approach would facilitate a much easier pathway for an extension of the exemption, and that it would therefore be more amenable, more susceptible to political pressure and populist initiatives. I've already talked about how the 8-year sunset period will make it more difficult for any farmers to make a transition if they have not done the necessary preparations in the intervening period, because the carbon price will have gone up substantially between now and 2031. That will also make it more difficult for farmers to not give up the exemptions and add to the political pressure to continue the exemptions, which at that time may not be necessary as perhaps they are now. And therefore, colleagues, my appeal is simply to ask that we do this the proper way. There is a sunset period. There is the possibility of extending the exemptions. My amendment by no means takes that away from the bill, but it allows for a more rigorous and indeed more proper process for allowing the exemptions to continue. Thank you, Chair.
Any further debate? Senator Delphine?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. If I refer to the witnesses that appeared, one said that if there's a technological improvement, we can change things later. This is the sponsor of the bill that said this. Another said, we're not sure what we will see in 2, 3, or 4 years. We're not sure what we'll see in 6, 7, or 8 years. So I'd say that 8 years is probably the magic number for research and development necessary so that businesses might have viable solutions. This was Kyle Larkin, the Executive Director of the Grain Producers of Canada, in September 2023. I think that this 8-year period sends a message to farmers saying that we understand the financial pressures. We know that they want to, and it sends also a message to businesses dealing with farmers to say that we need to innovate. This was said by Dave Carey, co-chair of the Carbon Alliance, on September 26, 2023. Another quote here. I'm not saying that there's no commercial solution that's acceptable, but if there's no market signal to stimulate this type of innovation, there won't be any innovation, whether it be in 8 years if the bill is adopted till the end of the date or even further in the future. Mr. Fergus, Director of National Policies, Climate Action Canada, rather. I have one last one. In 8 years, I think that agriculture will be very different in the country. Over the years, farmers will be much more efficient. Ray Orb, President, Association of Rural Municipalities of Saskatchewan. Another quote, I believe and I have confidence that in 8 years, many farmers will dry their grain using new technology, and it will be different from today's technology. Ray Orb, President of the Association of Rural Municipalities for Saskatchewan. And finally, Mr. Guéret, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, said, and I quote, we support the bill. With this timeline, it shows a signal that things have to change and they have to find other technologies and solutions, for example, to dry their grain. Right now, the members say that farms will be supported and the bill responds to this, and the temporal period seems adequate, seems to send the correct message to farmers. So these are quotes of witnesses that we heard, witnesses that agree with the bill, and they say that 8 years is sufficient. So I support the proposal. Thank you.
Any further debate? Senator Plett.
Well, I know that's likely going to fall on deaf ears, but we at least want to put on the record because, again, as I said earlier, we're happy to put on the record our fight for Canadian farmers. This amendment, in my humble opinion, is completely unnecessary. The section that is being removed was put in the bill in order to provide for an expedited process to extend the sunset clause period, if such an extension is deemed necessary. I would point out that this extension must be initiated by the government and must be approved by both houses of Parliament. It is not a backdoor regulatory process. There is no harm in leaving the process in place in case it is needed. On the other hand, removing the process would potentially harm producers. There is a precedent for this clause in the way it is. Such a provision existed in Bill C-30, the Fair Rail for Grain Farmers Act. The current Liberal government chose to use the provision brought in by the Conservatives to renew the sunsetting on extended interswitching, but did not renew it a second time when they brought in the Transportation Modernization Act. So the precedent is there, colleagues. This is an unnecessary, harmful amendment, and I will certainly be voting against this amendment, and I would encourage all senators to please think about the farmers in our country. We are hearing here constantly, and I'm not wanting this to be, I'm wanting to take even Senator St. Germain's admonition at the end of last meeting, let's not make this personal, so I will try not to. But we have heard last week and again today, we are hearing from Senators Wu and Delphon when they are destroying a bill that they are doing this because they want to help the grain farmers in the country. I just have a problem wrapping my mind around that we are helping the farmers when we are doing what we are doing to this bill. We have farmers across the country that are watching us right now and hoping and praying that we will do the right thing and save them from this horrible carbon tax that is being imposed on them and help them so that they can dry their grain, that they can grow their crops, that they can make a living, because they are being asked to produce food for all of us. And here we have two senators who think they know better than all of these farmers across the country. And we are just falling into that. And we have my good friend, the leader of the government, now showing clearly his interest in trying to prevent this bill from passing. This is not a necessary amendment. This is harmful, as the last amendment was. It is extremely harmful. Now, we know the game that is being played here. We know that the idea here is to make it look like we are, that we care about farmers. And we are going to improve the bill for you, and then you will get a better bill, because somehow we senators all know better what's best for you. And what this is doing, and let's be clear, even the amendment the other day, we don't even need this one. We know what the end game is. The end game here is to send an amended bill back to the House of Commons to try to stop this bill from passing. That is clearly the intent, and I'm afraid it's going to work. So for the rest of you senators that I believe really want to help, think about what you're doing here. Think about what this amendment does, and think about what the amendment the other day did. It kills this bill. Unless we will turn down a report, it will kill this bill. This bill will not pass. Farmers will not have the ability to get their exemptions. And we, colleagues, those of us around this table, are going to be responsible for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Plitt. Senator Cotter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and let me say I appreciated your ruling earlier. My own view is that we should be here debating the substance of the bill and its amendments, and not struggling with procedural issues. So I'm happy that this is a part of our conversation. In my view, the provision under debate right now, nor the amendment, are strictly necessary for Parliament to give consideration if it chooses 8 years from now. And on balance, I would prefer the more typical legislative process than the one that is proposed in the existing bill. That said, and here I think I am channeling the last of Senator Plitt's remarks, every amendment that we introduce into this bill puts in jeopardy the likelihood that the exemption in any form doesn't see the light of day. And that seems to me to be sad and ironic, since, based on our conversation last Thursday, we supported an aspect of the exemption itself at this committee. So, particularly with respect to grain drying. So for me, a relatively insignificant provision and a relatively insignificant amendment layered onto this are not justified, and I will vote against this amendment. Thank you.
Senator Cotter, any further debate? Seeing none, it is moved by the Honourable Senator Wu that Bill C-234 be amended in Clause 2A on page 2 by replacing lines 24 to 37 with the following: of the day on which this act comes into force, and B on page 3 by deleting lines 1 to 9. Is it your pleasure, honourable senators, to adopt the motion in amendment? I'd prefer a voice vote, please. So, the honourable senators, I've requested a recorded vote. I'll first ask the clerk to name all the senators present who are entitled to vote at this time, please.
The Honourable Senator Black, the Honourable Senator Bury, the Honourable Senator Cotter, the Honourable Senator Cardozo, l'Honourable Senator Dalphon, l'Honourable Sénatrice Dupuis, the Honourable Senator Gold PC, l'Honourable Sénatrice Miville-Deschênes, the Honourable Senator O, the Honourable Senator Plett, l'Honourable Sénatrice Saint-Germain, the Honourable Senator Simons, the Honourable Senator Wells, the Honourable Senator Wu.
Thank you. If any member present does not wish to vote, you may withdraw from the table now. The clerk will now call members' names, beginning with the chair and followed by the remaining members' names in alphabetical order. Members should verbally indicate how they wish to vote by saying yea, nay, or abstain.
The Honourable Senator Black,
No.
the Honourable Senator Bury, nay. The Honourable Senator Cotter,
No.
the Honourable Senator Cardozo,
Yes.
l'Honorable Sénateur Dalphon,
Oui.
l'Honorable Sénatrice Dupuis,
Oui.
the Honourable Senator Gold PC,
Yes.
l'Honorable Sénatrice Miville-Deschênes,
Oui.
the Honourable Senator O,
No.
the Honourable Senator Plett, l'Honorable Sénatrice Saint-Germain,
Oui.
the Honourable Senator Simons,
No.
the Honourable Senator Wells,
No.
the Honourable Senator Wu.
Yes.
Please.
Oh, yeas, oui, 7, set, nays, no, 7, set.
The motion and amendment therefore is defeated. I'm going to ask, is there any other amendments? Okay, we don't have to clause, okay, shall, so colleagues, shall the title carry?
Then we have to go back and say, does clause 2 carry?
Do we have to go back to clause 2? Shall clause 2 carry?
Agreed.
Carried. Shall the title carry? Shall the title carry? Shall the bill as amended carry?
Agreed.
So since there were amendments included that were adopted, is it agreed that the law clerk and parliamentary council be authorized to make necessary technical, grammatical, or other required non-substantive changes as a result of the amendments adopted by this committee, including updating cross-references and renumbering of provisions? Thank you, colleagues. Does the committee wish to consider pending observations to this report?
Oh, yes.
Of course. The committee, so we'll now move in camera to discuss the text of observations and further to consider a draft report. Is it agreed?
I propose that we stay in public. Hi to the public.
Is it agreed, colleagues, that we stay in public to discuss observations? Carried. Carried. Okay. Colleagues, is it agreed that the committee allow the transcription of today's meeting, this part of it, that one copy be kept with the clerk of the committee for... Oh, we don't have to worry about that? Thank you.
So now we discuss.
Now we'll discuss the observations. Thank you, Clerk. Observations. Do we have any to put forward? Yes. Senator Simons,
Are we doing them in alphabetical order, or?
you said yes first.
Okay, then we're doing mine first. Okay. My observation is quite simple and might be combined with some of the other ones when we get to them. My observation simply reads, le comité reconnaît qu'un investissement public.
The committee recognizes.
Avez-vous tous un exemplaire?
Sorry, Senator Simon, for interrupting you.
All right. I'm going to try it in French, and then I'm going to read it again in English so that you actually understand what it means, instead of my bad French.
The committee recognizes that greater public and private investment in research and development into viable drying and heating technologies is needed to prepare for the sunset clause provision of this bill. The financial burden of this technological transformation should not fall solely on the shoulders of farmers.
Is that greater public and private investment in research and development into viable drying and heating technologies is needed to prepare for the sunset clause provision of this bill. The financial burden of this technological transformation should not fall solely on the shoulders of farmers.
Any discussion?
I agree.
Are we agreed that that observation should be appended? Thank you. And I believe Senator Bury asked to follow Senator Simons. Senator Bury?
Thank you so much. I'm learning a lot as usual. So my observation is about clean technology as well. And so I'll read my observation. We have been made aware that the Agricultural Clean Technology Program is currently oversubscribed. In the light of this, we strongly recommend expanding the accessibility and availability of this fund to a wider group of farmers as a critical step in mitigating greenhouse pollution emissions and fostering sustainable agricultural practices. I just wanted to say that it's really been a privilege listening to all the witnesses, speaking to farmers, and coming from the medical, a different system from the medical profession, and understanding how systemic change works. Oftentimes you need, not oftentimes, especially with complexity science and complex adaptive systems, you need many levers. Take, for example, a recipe. You know, you could have all the ingredients, but if you don't have the yeast, we're talking about bread, if you're going to have leavened bread, it's not going to rise. And that's what I've found in the community, is that if we don't have all the levers, which were mentioned by the David Suzuki Foundation, was applied to be effective, this Greenhouse Emissions Act needs to be applied broadly. They need to be provisions for revenue recycling. There has to be equity, and my observation, government investment to support development of adoption of cleaner technologies. And so I would ask that you consider this amendment.
Thank you. Senator Simons, you have a discussion point?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I very much support Senator Bury's observation, which I think flows naturally from mine, and I think very much parallels one of Senator Dalphon's amendments, observations. And so I wondered if Senator Dalphon would consider that
We'll get to that.
an appropriate sort of, yes.
Senator Wells.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator Bury, for that observation. I agree fully. If there's going to be a program like the Agricultural Clean Tech Program, it should have enough capacity to take care of those who would like to apply, and clearly, if it's oversubscribed, that there's not enough. So I think that's this recommendation or this observation that the government make provisions in that program for those that wish, and of course that wish to subscribe to that. And of course, the objective is noble, and that's to mitigate greenhouse pollution emissions. And I think that's part of the market signal that we would think is a positive step.
Thank you, Senator Wells. Senator Plett.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I also agree with Senator Bury, but I also agree with what Senator Simon said about it being very similar to Senator Delphon's, and so for the sake of not having more observations than necessary, I'm wondering whether they could meld them together somehow.
So, Senator Delphon, do you wish to respond?
I accept the suggestions of my honorable colleague here, Senator Plett, and I move to withdraw my amendment.
So that's the clean
It's the
technology
same-
in grain drying and
the
barn
same
heating.
objective.
Is that
Yes.
okay? Thank you. Are we agreed that Senator Bury's observation be appended to this amended bill?
Agreed.
Agreed?
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Any further observations? Senator Wu.
Yes, you will have received a copy of this observation. It has to do with the rebate under Bill C-8 and the Senate National Finance Committee. Would you like to circulate if colleagues haven't seen the observation yet? Shall I just go ahead and read it?
Yes,
Okay.
we should read it into the, and I
Of
apologize,
course.
we did not read the previous ones. Oh, Senator, yes, we did. Go ahead. Yes, we did.
On June 9th, 2022, the government and parliament introduced a refundable tax credit via Bill C-8, designed to return the estimated fuel charge proceeds from the on-farm use of natural gas and propane in grain drying and barn heating activities to farmers located in backstop jurisdictions. The committee recommends that the Department of Finance work with the Canada Revenue Agency to target this refund more precisely and effectively to farms that rely on natural gas and propane for grain drying, or to eliminate it if Bill C-234 is adopted to avoid double compensation. The committee notes that it did not receive a report from the Senate Standing Committee on National Finance pertaining to these matters as requested by the Senate through a motion adopted on June 13, 2023. The financial aspects of this matter merit further examination per the Senate's motion.
Can I just be clear, you started that last sentence by
Yes,
the
I shortened it.
Okay, thank
yeah.
you. Thank you. That should be noted. Thank you. Any further comments? Yes, Senator Plett.
Well, respectfully, I disagree with this observation. Senator Wu has another one that I do agree with, but this one I don't. This observation, in my opinion, is contradictory to the intent of the bill, because what it does is it asks the government to target the existing rebate more effectively, when in fact Bill C-234 will make the rebate redundant. Furthermore, the government already has a plan in place to rescind the rebate should C-234 pass. So I don't think this observation is in place. Thank you.
Senator Wells.
Thank you, and I'm in agreement with Senator Plett on that. Certainly, the possibility of double compensation would be avoided, or would be eliminated by a policy decision of CRA, and that can be a directive from the minister. So I don't think that's something that's worthy of a specific observation, because it's obvious that it wouldn't happen anyway. The other comment that Senator Wu has in his observation regarding the Standing Senate Committee on National Finance, they, through their own discussion at perhaps at steering or for the full committee, decided not to go with that, which is their right. They can just have the primary committee study the bill, which it did in full, and of course it'll go back to Senate for a third reading anyway, where anything like any of the issues that finance could have addressed can be addressed there. So I think it's redundant to have this in a process that's already being covered.
Senator Wu.
I thank Senators Plett and Wells for their comments. the observation concerning C8 and the refundable tax credit allows for the possibility that the bill is adopted, in which case the observation says that the non-refundable tax credit should be eliminated. But we cannot prejudge where this bill will go from here, and I think it's important to put on the record that there is a mechanism that does provide rebates to farmers who use natural gas and propane in its entirety, but that this rebate is not well targeted. It is in part the design of the rebate that it should not be perfectly targeted, but we heard comments from a number of witnesses that there perhaps could be some better targeting of the refundable tax credit, which maintains the greenhouse gas pollution pricing incentive. So just to make sure that we are not in a situation where farmers get nothing because this bill doesn't go through at all, it's I think, valuable to advise the government to see if they can do better with the refundable tax credit that they've already put in place.
Thank you, Senator Wu. Any further discussion? Colleagues, is it agreed that this observation be appended to the AGFO report? I think we better roll call.
The Honourable Senator Black.
Yes.
The Honourable Senator Bury.
Yes.
The Honourable Senator Cotter.
Yes.
L'Honorable Sénateur Dalphon.
Oui.
L'Honorable Sénatrice Dupuis. Excuse me. The Honourable Senator Cardozo.
Oui.
The Honourable Senator Gold, PC.
Yes.
L'Honorable Sénatrice Miville-Deschênes.
Est-ce que je peux m'abstenir?
Can I abstain?
Abstain. The Honourable Senator O.
No.
The Honourable Senator Plett.
No.
L'Honorable Sénatrice Saint-Germain.
Oui.
The Honourable Senator Simons.
Yes.
The Honourable Senator Wells.
No.
The Honourable Senator Wu.
Yes.
Yeas, oui, 10, 10, no, 3, 3, abstention, 1, 1.
The observation will be appended to the amended bill and report. Further observations? Senator Wu.
Let me read the observation, and then I want to make a short comment. The observation is as follows, quote, "The committee observes that climate change is a major and worsening threat to the stability of Canada's agricultural sector. The committee urges the federal government to continue to develop, support, and appropriately fund programs to stabilize on-farm revenues at risk due to extreme weather events and other sources of volatility, including Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's business risk management programs such as Agri-Stability and Agri-Insurance," unquote. Chair, may I just give a quick commentary on the observation? I think what we heard, colleagues, is that farmers face a lot of uncertainty in their business, a lot of volatility because they are price takers, volatility due to the variability of input as well as output prices. And it was my assessment that propane and natural gas, while definitely a source of volatility, downward volatility in this sense, because natural gas prices have fallen significantly, they in fact are a relatively minor source of volatility that farmers face. And if we are really concerned about the risk that farmers face because of uncertainty in world markets, uncertainty in weather, uncertainty around input prices. We need to have a more holistic solution, and this observation encourages the government to look at that bigger picture.
Thank you, Senator Wells. Any further comments? Sorry. Thank you, Senator Wells. Any further comments? Senator Delphine.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two comments, and the first is that farmers are not necessarily all price takers. Some are price fixers. When they are in the supply management system, it does apply to milk, it does apply to poultry, and it does apply to eggs. The second comment, I will gladly withdraw my last amendment observations because it covers the same idea. So I will withdraw mine and will make the debate even shorter. So once more, I'm following the advice of my
And
Senator
which one are you withdrawing? Can you
The
tell us?
last one, the observations called climate change and carbon pricing.
Thank you. Senator Cotter, this is on the observation. Thank you.
Yes. It's as much as anything, I support this observation, but I'm just worried about the wording and whether it seems to say what you intended to say. In the latter part of it, it says it's important for the government to support and appropriately fund programs to stable on-farm revenues at risk due to extreme weather events and other sources of volatility. And then there's a list of a bunch of agriculture programs that sound like
the sources of volatility.
Sources of, and I guess, I don't know, I don't have the, like, if we could get Agri-Food Canada out of this, maybe farmers would be better off, and that might draw some support. But it might be something that we could leave to the clerk and others to just structure it in a way that identifies these as ways by which the volatility can be moderated rather than they are actually causes of the volatility.
Senator Wu?
Every committee needs a good grammarian, and he's absolutely right. Perhaps the way to do it is to move the clause referring to AgCan's programs, to insert that clause right after the words appropriately fund programs such as, including, and then to continue with the rest of the sentence. Or to break it up into two sentences.
Thank you.
But we trust.
Any further discussion on this observation? Colleagues, are we in agreement that this observation be appended to the amended bill in our final report? Agreed. Thank you, colleagues. Any further observations? Thank you. Senator Simons,
It's not an observation. Senator Black has pointed out to me that I erred in not providing a title for my observation. So I would like to call it alternate technologies.
alternate technologies.
Yes.
Thank you. Anything further? I'm going to ask the same question of Senator Bury.
May I respond,
Please.
Madam Chair? Supporting agricultural clean technology adoption.
Supporting agricultural. Say that again.
Agricultural clean technology adoption.
Great, thank you. Colleagues, since we voted on these, or they called them in order, it would be my suggestion that we list them in the order of adoption. Are we agreed on that one? Thank you, colleagues. No, don't have to do that.
That's right.
Colleagues, is it agreed that the draft report be adopted in both official languages and that Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure be empowered to approve the final version of the report in both official languages, taking into consideration this meeting's discussions and with any necessary editorial, grammatical, and translation changes required? Is it agreed that the chair be authorized to present the report in the Senate in both official languages at the earliest opportunity?
Agreed.
Both of those are carried. Is it agreed that I report this bill as amended with observations to the Senate? Agreed. Thank you, colleagues. committee members for your active participation. Senator Wells, I apologize.
Sorry, no worries. I just wanted to go back to, did you ask if the title stood? Was that?
We did that already.
Okay, thanks.
And it was carried. Anything further?
Otherwise, we need unanimous consent to revert.
Thank you to the committee members for your active participation in dealing with this bill. I'd like to also take the moment to thank the staff and the clerk's staff and support for all your work. Very much appreciated, and the folks behind us, our interpreters, the debate team transcribing this meeting, and all those involved in supporting us around the table and in our office. Is there any further business, colleagues?
Yes, do we have maybe we need to go into camera for this to discuss Thursday's meeting. Do we need to
We'll
move
go into camera.
Yep.
In camera. Steering can discuss, yes, Senator.
Before we break away or go in camera, I would like to thank you for having chaired these meetings. I know that there were some debates and, there were some questions of procedures and they're technical and difficult, but you kept your calm all the time and you were a good chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Cotter?
I would just like to extend a thanks to the members of the committee who we may never see again. It was great to have you.
Thank you, Senator Cotter. The steering committee will meet immediately following this to discuss Thursday's meeting. If there's no other business, honorable senators, meeting adjourned.
All right, everybody. Have a good one, and we'll see you tomorrow for our live stream of the House of Commons. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.